Hello and welcome to our latest episode of Relentless Renewal. Today, we'll be talking about how one of the newest technologies, AI, is transforming one of the oldest industries, construction. It's my great privilege to have with me today Dr. Marco Bornschlegl. Marco leads the Central Division for Innovation and Digitalization at STRABAG Group, one of the leading global construction companies. They've built a data science hub aimed at improving operational efficiency to save time and reduce financial losses. With just 3 months of data, the algorithm can predict risk with 75% accuracy. Looking forward to our conversation. Thanks so much, Marco, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Dominik. It's a pleasure for me to be here today.
So to get us started, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
My IT career started in the age of 14 or 15 when my sister donated me my first PC. It was a very old one comparable to today. It was a 486 version. It was very slow, but it was my start. And this PC guided me the way into the IT business. So after school, I did my apprenticeship, a regular apprenticeship in Germany. And afterwards, I studied information technology. And then in parallel to my job, I did my PhD thesis. Since 2016, I'm with STRABAG, and since 2020, I'm in the STRABAG Central Division Innovation and Digitalization, and since 2022, I lead this Central Division.
That's a great story, and the piece about the first PC really resonates. That's also how I got started. And I can imagine doing a PhD while working, that certainly wasn't that easy as well. So I know like your personal theme is around making progress. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, work in progress. It's our mission. It's the STRABAG mission. We want to be climate neutral by 2040, and that's not easy for us because we need to define complete new ways of working. So we need to conserve the environment and we need to decrease our dependency of fossil energy. And for us, work in progress, that's our strategy. And in this strategy, or to be more precise, we have one important part, that's technology leadership. And when you talk about technology leadership, you need to talk about AI. And especially, you said it before in your introduction, we are a very traditional industry. So technology leadership is not only data and AI, it's also our construction environment. But for us, AI or data is very important to achieve our goals. So, and work in progress is not only a mantra, it's our mission to achieve the goals, to be more sustainable and more innovative in the future.
Can you talk a bit more about, what you also just mentioned, the new and the old, the technology and the construction industry, how is this working?
Yeah, for sure. The construction industry is very traditional, but we at STRABAG, I think we are very innovative. So we try new ways. And in my past, when I remember in 2017, in my former role as head of infrastructure worldwide, I was responsible for the IT infrastructure over the whole STRABAG Group, so from Chile to Australia. And we started our journey in 2017 because when you talk about digitalization today, you have to build the foundation yesterday, or you have to build the foundation today when you start to be innovative tomorrow. And we started our cloud journey, our cloud migration in 2017, and that was a long way. That was not an easy way, but I think that's the foundation for our activities today. So we are able to integrate the data from all our decentralized data sources all over the STRABAG Group to be able to implement innovative tools like artificial intelligence. And before you can talk about artificial intelligence, before you can use the data, you have to identify where the data is located and you have to transform the data to one single point. And I think that's very important for us, and we did a lot of great initiatives in the past.
The point around data that you're making, we hear that from a lot of customers. I think we also see a lot of customers getting stuck on their AI journey on the data not being available. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, on the journey around data that you had?
Yeah, for sure. I remember when we both started our project, our DARIA project together. DARIA, it's our data-driven risk analysis project. I remember when we met each other in Vienna 2.5 years ago and started the discussion about AI, about use cases. And it took nearly 18 months for us to collect, pre-process and store the data in a way to be able to use AI tools. So I think when you look back on the track, in context to this project, we have nearly 80 to 85% data collection efforts and 10 to 15% or 20% AI algorithm modeling effort. So when you talk about AI, you first need to organize your data and you first need to pre-process your data in a way that you can use it for further processing or for further AI algorithms, you know.
That's a great heuristic. You're 80 to 85% data, and then 15 to 20% on the AI. So you started talking about your AI applications and Daria, and I know you've also been working on that data science hub. Can you talk a bit like, what is it that you do and how it's adding value to the business?
Yeah, adding value is for us very important because we are not a university. We are a company that needs to generate value. We need to be innovative. We need to be competitive in the future. We have a slogan here in our STRABAG Group. We don't want to be moved. We want to move. So for us, it's important to define new ways, because when you talk about AI, you have two important topics. The first topic or the first goal is the increase of the efficiency. I'm sure that efficiency is only the first step. So efficiency is needed because of the shortage of skilled labor, For me, it's important that nobody has to fear the introduction or the definition of AI, because it reminds me on our journey, as I said before, in 2017 on our cloud journey. Most of our administrators thought that when we move to the cloud, they are not longer used, or we don't need them. And in fact, all of them are still with us, and that's important. And in context to AI, we have the same thing. Most of the people fear that AI will replace the human user, and I think AI will not replace the human user. And by the way, I like your slogan, or I like your co-pilot wording, because co-pilot is exactly that. I used to say, not co-pilot, I used to say in the past, assisted AI, because with AI we can help users to look in depth to a special point of view, and not to overview all of the data. But I will come back to my initial answer. The first step is the increase of productivity. Yes. But I think the most important second step is to define new business models. We need to define, and also in the construction industry, we need to define digital business models, and AI helps us. I will give you an example. In addition to Daria is focused on the increase of the productivity. Yeah. So to reduce financial losses.
Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on what Daria does?
Yeah, for sure. Daria tries to identify financial risks in an early stage of the project execution phase, of construction project execution phase. And we are very successful. So we identify nearly 75% of risky projects in the transportation infrastructure construction project domain after 3 months of project execution.
And if I remember, I think you told me at some point you have a very interesting distribution also of the projects, right? You have the very large project that are well under control, and it's about managing the long tail, right?
Yes, we trained this algorithm with more than 10,000 of completed projects over the last 10 years. So we have small projects, we have large projects. But in the end, when I talk about assisted AI, or as you said, co-pilot, we need to find risky projects in the small and medium-sized projects, because the large projects, everybody's focused on the large projects, but nobody has time, or we lack in time to focus on the smaller projects. And Daria helps us to identify risks in the whole bunch of project data, and that's important for us, that we give our business domain experts the ability to look in depth in a single project where Daria highlights.
Yeah, so it's kind of finding the needle in the haystack, right?
Yes, exactly.
And then validating, like once the Daria system highlights a potential risk, like how easy or difficult is it to validate for the human that it's an actual issue?
Actually, it's not very easy, because when Daria highlights a project, you need a human user to validate the results. And the human user, the domain user, the domain experts, they know what can be happen during the project execution. So for us, it's important that they don't need to look over the whole bunch of projects. So we give them an opportunity or the ability to look in depth on a certain amount of relevant project.
So just to confirm my understanding, so you're basically saying the system finds a needle in the haystack, it flags the projects to look at, and then the human basically makes the final decision whether there's an issue or not, right? So it's the human and the AI working together.
Exactly.
Yeah. You alluded to that, right? It's such a wonderful example of the co-pilot concept, right? And as you said, like, I think we took a lot of care in choosing that wording and not saying autopilot, right? Because, and you also talked about the 75% accuracy, right? I think it's very easy to say, like, oh, why is it only 7%? Why is it not 98%, right? And I think the key here is not to expect perfection from the machine, but for the machine to assist the human, and then in the end, the human staying accountable for the outcome, right? And I think what you're saying is where the machine adds a lot of value is basically in finding the one project to investigate, right?
Exactly, but you said an important point. You said you don't have to expect 100% accuracy, but when I talk with our users and with our project members, many of them think that AI will give you 100%, and AI will never give you 100%. And the human user even are not 100% sure if a project goes wrong or not. So we only give them a kind of co-pilot, assisted AI, to look only into relevant project, and that's exactly the matter.
I think this is the big change in like how we probably all need to learn how to use AI, because I think we're all used to that the computer gives perfect answers, right? Like when you grew up with your PC, when I grew up with my PC, the PC, it's always rules-based. You kind of assume the PC is right. And I think we also know this from our kind of consumer ChatGPT experiences, right? Sometimes you're really amazed by what ChatGPT can do, and then sometimes you're like, why the hell is it not getting this right? And I think it really changes the way how we need to interact with the computer, right? Because we cannot assume the answers perfect anymore. It's more like a human assistant, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the very important topic of trust. So AI is a complete different way of programming. So the kind of how a computer or a PC interprets a result is completely different in context to traditional programming algorithms or methods. Trust is also important, and that's in direct context to the fear of the humans that they will replace in the future. And I think that's the same, like I said, in context to my cloud or to our cloud journey. I think AI will not replace human users, but AI gives human users the ability to focus on their actual job, you know?
And do you feel like with all the imperfections in the system and so on, like, do you feel it's adding value in the end? It's giving you productivity in the way now the interaction works between, the AI and the human, the way you're using it day to day in your work?
Yeah, it's a transformation. It's especially transformation for human users. But I think and I believe that it increases the productivity. So Daria is in our system. It's productive, or since the beginning of the January, it's productive in our system for the transportation infrastructure construction domain. And I think for us as corporate, it's very important to generate value. Everything that will not generate value in the future is not good for us. So for us, it's important not only to have innovative ideas. We need to move or to migrate our AI pilots into enterprise-wide production. That's the most important part to generate that added value.
So let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think that is probably the other thing that's on everybody's mind, right? Like everybody has pilots, but how do you move from pilot to production? What's your experience in making that happen?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions, and we made a lot of experience, good and bad experience. For me, the most important thing is you have to give human users, domain experts that are using the AI tools or applications, you need to increase the trust in handling or in interacting with computers with AI-based results, because for me, it's not easy to formalize trust in a number or in a KPI. That's not easy. But what we did with Daria, we gave our end users, our domain experts, we gave them charts in addition to the percentage of losses. So, and by the aid of these charts, they feel comfortable. So they feel comfortable. They know, okay, the algorithm. I don't know why the algorithm gets to the result, but I know when I look into the charts why it must be this result.
I guess this is what we then call explainable AI, right? So the machine in a way, what it does is a black box, but it gives you some justification that the expert can work with to basically validate the output from the AI. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think what you're describing is really like it's everywhere, and I love that you went through that journey, right, and you figured it out. And I think there's a lot for like all of us to learn on like how we actually use AI in a production in a very critical environment as you guys are in. You were talking about, it's you have two objectives, right? Productivity and innovation. We now talked about the productivity piece and how it actually works in reality. Like, let's talk a bit more about the innovation piece. Like, what's your thinking there?
Yeah, the innovation piece, I think that's the most important piece, because productivity is only the first step. For me, it's important, especially in the construction industry, to generate new digital business models. So I talked about generative design. That's public available, or the information on our Work on Progress website. Generative design combines human expertise with artificial intelligence. So it optimizes the planning process of building construction by the aid of parameterization. This is, supported by AI. Supported by AI is maybe the right way. And for us, we developed in the past 2.5 years great tools. So my colleagues did a great job, very great job. But at the moment, we only publish these solutions to internal domain users, so to technical users, to architects, and my vision for the future, and that's a vision, I hope we are very fast, but that's a vision today. My vision is to enable public users, non-domain expert, to use such kind of digital construction products. That will be a great challenge, but that will be mind-blowing, and that will be a complete change of the industry. So we are a little bit away at the moment, but I think we are on a good way to achieve that, because we do everything to get the applications to the next level. It's a difference to develop applications for domain users and in context to that for end users. So you know that at Microsoft, it's complete difference from the architecture, from the development side. But I think that's the most critical part. And I have a strong vision for the construction industry. And my goal is to create new business models and to create new digital business models to sell a digital construction service.
That's very exciting. So Axel here behind the camera just told me before he just bought a house. Do you think in the future we'll just basically be able to like prompt and say like, help me visualize the house if I kind of, change the design in a certain way? Or like, is that what you're describing?
That's exactly what I described. So we're working on that.
Okay, you're working on that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's very exciting. I mean, I've got an opportunity to see like how architects work, right? And I think it's very complex today. And I think, making it easier and getting into the hands of consumers would be incredibly powerful.
And the most important challenge, we have already a set of tools for different use cases during the building process of a house. But we are working on the bigger picture to integrate and to connect the certain use cases together. And then we are talking about designing a house by the aid of computers. So, but I think we are not so far away, but it is a journey. But we're working on that.
I mean, it is in a way, it's really mind-boggling how fast the technology evolves, right? Like just looking at these recent Zora videos, like all of a sudden we can create, like 1 minute video films that look like, like real video. And I can see how this is, might be happening faster than we think. Beyond the technology, I guess there's also, and this is where you are the expert, right? There's a lot of, I guess, legacy and history in the way the industry operates, right? Let's assume we have the technical capability that you described. Like, how do you think the industry will adapt to that?
I'm not sure if the industry is the problem. I'm in discussions with colleagues that we have rules and regulations that are not allowing us to calculate data or algorithm based. I think that's the most challenge nowadays, especially in Germany and in the European Union. So when you talk about the AI Act, for example, so on the one side it's good for data privacy, but on the other hand, it gives us limitations in context to technology.
So do you feel like, it sounds like you feel we have a competitive advantage in Europe because of regulation, or like?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We have a competitive.
You are part of a global organization. Like how you're dealing with this?
At the moment, we don't have the biggest problems because we try to implement our algorithms internally. So when you talk about an internal usage, you have the regulations inside the European Union. That's fine for us. That's okay. But when you talk about publishing digital construction service to end users, you get new challenges because you don't know where your end users are located. So you have to decide which countries, which areas, which continents you would like to. In which continents you would like to provide your services. But that's a discussion we can talk about in 2 or 3 years,
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
For us, it's very important, and you said it before, the speed of the technology change is so fast. I remember 2 years ago, STRABAG, we were one of the first OpenAI beta users.
Okay.
Long before OpenAI was public known, or known in the LinkedIn community or wherever. And when you look at the increase of the innovation in AI, it's dramatic. So we focus on topics which are 3 months later which will be replaced 3 months later by software as a service. I give you an example of the past. We were one of the first who used drones for digital object recognition. And I remember we set up a very complicated infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, to handle the massive drone data. And when we finished this infrastructure, the vendor of the drone software said, okay, now we have a software as a service for you. So you try to implement a solution for the customers, and 3 months later, when you are finished with this solution will be available as software as a service.
That's a great point. And indeed, I think that's also a conversation we have very often with customers, right? They feel like the large language models today, they're not giving them the full capabilities. So they're thinking about, expanding the LLM capability. And then the question is, does it really make sense to do that, right? Or do you just basically build on the state of the art and you bet on, innovation, in the underlying technology basis?
No, you must focus on current topics. That's no option to say, okay, let's take time and look what happens. So that's not an option for us, and especially that's not an option for me. To be clear, that's definitely not an option.
Well, thank you, Marco. This has been very inspiring discussion. I love your vision of, how, I guess the entire world of construction will change, right? Also for the consumer. It's very, very interesting talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dominik.